Hey, this is Jason, and I'm here with another track walk. To begin, we'll watch the lap without any commentary from the cockpit. Next, we'll watch the lap again from the chase cam. Doing this helps us build some framework and context for the actual slow motion track walk that we'll do next. When we do this, we will go through the lap, hopefully without pausing the replay at all, and just try to keep things moving in a fluid manner. Finally, I'll do a deeper dive into a few of the corners and talk about potential trouble spots. Before we continue, I'd like to make quick mention of the Sunday Night Skippy Racing League, which, despite what's in the name, also races V's. We run 2 Skip Barber events on Sunday evenings, and we run our Formula Vee series on Thursday evenings. Sessions open at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Qualifying starts shortly after 8:30, and then we run 2 sprint races. We have a very kind and welcoming group of drivers and a very open and engaging Discord community where we're always discussing tips, tricks, and racecraft. If you're looking for good, clean, hard racing, and you're either a Skippy driver or a V driver, you should definitely check us out. League and Discord links can be found in the description. All right, let's start the track walk. This week, we're at Oran Park, which is a very fun, fast, drive it like you stole it lap. The lap we'll be breaking down is a 47.477 second lap. On this particular lap, I'm about 27 hundredths off the VRS time. My fuel consumption is a little bit less per lap, it looks like, but track temp is identical to VRS, 23.89 Celsius. No changes to brake bias or anything like that. Real tricky lap. I normally wouldn't point this out in a track walk. The perfect lap here would be a .367. Optimal is a 435. The reason I bring this up is it was actually very difficult to hit this mark. The V is quickest when it's on cold tires, or fresh tires, I should say. And to really hit this, it had to be the lap immediately after the outlap. I could get into the 4s on that first full lap, and then in the 5s on the second full lap, and then I could usually consistently stay in the 6s after that. But staying in the 4s or getting into the 4s once I've got heat into the tires is very, very difficult. And the reason I want to point this out is some of the feedback that I get both within the league and outside of the league when we're doing these track walks is people get very frustrated that they can't hit these times. And it's really important to point out that whether it's VRS or anybody who's providing lap tutorial content, much of what you see in these guides is absolute ideal unicorn circumstances. It's not reasonable to be on your 10th lap in the V and getting frustrated that you're not hitting a 47.477 because that's just not physically possible in the car unless you let the tires cool way down. And even then it's sketchy because you've burned off some of the rubber. So make sure that when you're trying to chase these times that your expectations are reasonable. I would argue that if you're employing the strategies that we're about ready to discuss or strategies that you might find in another tutorial, that if you're deep into a stint, that you're giving yourself a bit of a break. It's not possible to hit these ideal times after the first couple of laps just due to the nature of the tires. And of course, make sure that you're aware of the track conditions that you're on and the track conditions of the driver who put the tutorial together that you're watching, because these are all big significant factors that can influence your lap times. All right, we're going to do our 2 commentary-less laps, first from the cockpit and second from the chase cam. All right, let's do the slow-mo track walk. As you can imagine, the final corner getting onto the straight is pretty crucial. That sets us up for maximum acceleration and top end speed down the front straight. I really wasn't happy with my traversal through this on either lap, but my choice between the two, I think the setup for the lap was a little bit better than the pass through here on the lap itself. So we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next pass. But what's really important is that we set ourselves up to get back on the throttle as early as possible and fully commit to using all of the track on exit. If you're not at least a little nervous about hitting this wall on exit, then you're probably leaving something on the table. That doesn't mean that we should be careless and not be shooting for some consistency. After all, we don't want to actually tag the wall. We want to make sure that we can complete the lap. But we've got to find a good balance there because doing that is really one of the main things that's going to set us up for a very successful lap. We're going to use all of the track, and we're going to gradually move ourselves back onto track proper, I guess, at the left of this white line. And then we're going to stay to the right. And getting into turn one here is so incredibly crucial. I think this is where time is going to be won and lost on any given lap. There's definitely some tricky components to each corner throughout the lap, but the first and final turns are really where it's won and lost. Now, aside from the consequences of severely missing the mark on the final turn, T1 really is the most crucial corner on the track. The final tenths in this corner require absolute surgical precision in order to pick them up. Fortunately, we can draw from our experience in turn 3 at Summit Point's Jefferson Circuit last week. I like to brake to the left as soon as the barrier changes on my right, so not this point right here, but as we get a little further down, let's accelerate this a little bit. So really, I'm looking for that change right there, and I'm going to brake to the left, and as soon as I'm pointed, I'm going to get on about, I don't know, 70-75% of the brakes, maybe even a little bit more than that. And then I'm going to really try to tuck into the corner. This is not a late apex corner whatsoever. We want to get into the corner early and slide in to this really nice groove that has a solid positive camber, and then roll onto the throttle. It's probably not necessarily a throttle stomp so much as just a consistent rolling on of the throttle. And then we want to commit to it. And then as we're coming out of this corner, we're going to keep it nice and tight to the left, or at least as much as the tires allow. We don't want to scrub those fronts at all. We're going to burn up these tires in a race, so we've got to save what we can. But only track out as much as you need to, because we need to stay or get back to the left, and we don't want to have to fight the car to do that. We've got to open up this next corner as much as we can. In this particular car, we're going to use exactly this much curb, no more, no less. If we use up more than that, it's going to unsettle the car too much. We're going to get really good compression out of the corner here, and as soon as we feel that compression, we're going to use that and lean into it to make what's really a fairly sharp right. We want to stay off that concrete patch right there because that will disturb the car. So the curb that I just used there is really the ideal amount. We're going to straighten things out and really do the exact same thing in reverse for this left right here. I'd say a good portion of the time I do end up clipping a little bit of the grass. A little bit is okay. You've got to really abuse it to get an off track, and it's not too disruptive to the car. And we're going to plan on using every ounce of track and a lot of curb on the exit up here. We just came through turn 3. So we're going to use this exit of 3 to round out this track as much as possible and set up for turn 4. Now, what's really crucial is that we don't drop a wheel going into the grass. There are 2 ways that we can rotate through this corner. We can do a really sharp lift, or we can tap the brakes about 10%. Either way, we want to make sure that we have some steering lock preloaded in there to get the most out of that forward weight transfer. That's why we do one of those 2 things, is to get the car to lurch forward, get that forward bite, and get the car rotated. And the sooner we get that car rotated, the the earlier we can get back on the throttle. Plan on using all of this curb. We can use this concrete as well. I probably could have used even more than that. But what's really important here is that we don't get on the throttle so early that we push wide out here. Really important that we don't do that for obvious reasons. If you do find yourself past the concrete along this curb, just like we discussed at Jefferson coming out of turn 5 there, you're along for the ride. You're a passenger if you end up in the grass or in the sand right here. So once that happens, calm down and just accept that you're off the track. Don't try to fight it or turn through it, or you're going to spin out over here. Resist the temptation to swing all the way out to the left. Whenever the skippy comes here, we see it a lot. People feel like they've got to open up turn 5 here way more than they really need to. It's just not necessary. You really don't even need more than half the track to open this up. And if you do that, then you're just covering more distance than you really need to, both out here and getting into the corner. We want to take the straightest line possible through this turn 5, turn 6 chicane. We can use a little bit of this concrete right here without upsetting the car. That's typically what I shoot for right there, and then straight line it up here. I missed this a little bit. I generally like to have my left wheels tracking over the black asphalt, but that's really the most you can get away with. If you take the concrete on this side, it is going to severely disrupt the car. You're going to get jostled around quite a bit. It won't be difficult to control. That's not the issue, but it will scrub some acceleration. Going into turn 7, we can do this in either third or fourth gear. We'll talk a little bit more about this in depth in the next section, but it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So whatever you feel comfortable with. I like to keep it in third gear because it keeps this final turn less busy, less noisy, one less step to get through it successfully. But if you do decide to go into fourth gear, you want to do it while you're cresting the chicane back there. So back in turn 6, as you crest that hill, that's the perfect time to shift into fourth. Everything lines up perfectly to do that. And then there's a deep compression in this corner. You want to get on the brakes hard for that while you're turning the car to help get it rotated. That's also when you'll downshift into third if you decided to go up to fourth. And we really want to line our wheels up to get right on this curb. There's some grip around here if we do that. I don't really understand why, but it's there. It's like that in the Skippy as well. But what I really messed up on this corner is I hedged on the throttle, or I was late getting on the throttle. I hedged on the setup for this lap, and I was late getting onto it in this lap. And both times I left about, at least on this lap, I left about half a tenth on the table. So kind of frustrating. But even still, pretty good pass through that corner. And like I said, for the lap setup, we're going to plan on tracking all the way out to the wall. Even if you tag the wall really lightly in this car, you'll scrub a little bit of speed. You're not going to damage the car, and it's not going to really upset it unless you get it really, really wrong. So there's definitely a margin for error there that you can take advantage of. But really commit getting out of that corner on the throttle as early as you can. Again, there's some grip on that inside curb that you can make use of. You can even drop a wheel just to the left of that curb. This requires a lot of precision, but you can almost hook a wheel onto the inside of the curb and use that to slingshot your way around it. It's not quite as quick, I don't think, as going through it without doing that, but it's a lot of extra grip. That grip slows you down just a little bit, but it's a safer way to get through the corner relatively quickly if you can be precise about where you put the left side of the car. So that's the lap. Again, that's a 47.477. Next up, we will tackle a couple of these corners in more depth. All right, first I want to talk a little bit more about turn 1. Like I said earlier, this is really where time, like lots of tenths, are going to be won and lost. Um, there's probably a few different ways we can get through this corner. I like to first point the car and then I'll get on the brake. I don't really want to do both because washing out here in any way, shape, or form can be pretty catastrophic. If we miss the camber on the inside groove of this corner, it's so easy to just sling right into the grass out there. So I don't want to risk breaking the rear end loose right here. I want to break it loose, when we start corner transition, because that helps me, transition into the exit of the corner. And by doing that, I can get on the throttle a little bit sooner. But for here, I just want to point myself at the corner, get things straightened out. We can see here that I don't have any steering lock applied, and I'm on the brakes pretty well. And then I slide into this groove. I don't want to miss this because if we crest this groove, it's really hard to keep things under control. And what I do is there's a brief moment where I am off the brake and off the throttle with a lot of steering lock applied. And in this car, that is a really great way to break the rear end loose, whether it's intentional or not. In this case, it's intentional. Just like getting through turn 3 at Jefferson Circuit, we can use this moment to get a lot of rotation out of the car and then create an even earlier exit. And this is what we mean when we talk about prioritizing the exits of corners. That's exactly what I'm doing here, and that's how I'm doing. So once I'm happy with where it's pointed, I'm going to roll back onto the throttle. I don't want to stomp it because that'll push me out a little bit. And at this point, we're not in any danger of washing out through the corner. The threat now is tracking too wide on exit. So I'm rolling onto the throttle so that I can have better control over my exit. I really don't want to be all the way out here. And again, I think we're going to see that in races. And yeah, you're leaving a lot of time on the table if you meet this curb over here. So, all right. Next up, real quick, again, as I mentioned in our slow-mo track walk, we don't want to use too much curb here. It will really upset the car and slow us down. Same here. Curb usage is perfect. I don't want any of this concrete. It will really upset the car. And with the amount of steering lock we have applied, it's very easy to find ourselves in an out of control situation, setting up for turn 3 up here. Again, as we set up here, there are 2 ways to get through this corner. Again, I talked about this in the slow motion track walk. I don't want to drop a wheel, at least not as I'm applying steering lock. So I'm coming in here relatively straightened out, a little bit of lock, nothing nasty. But now that I'm on the curb, I've got 2 choices. I can either come off the throttle very abruptly and use that to rotate the car, or I can come off gently and add a little bit of brake. And when I say a little, we're talking 5–10%. We're not adding brake to slow the car down. We're adding brake to get the weight forward because we need weight over the fronts. In my experimentation, coming off the throttle abruptly is the quicker way through the corner. That is not how I did the lap, I don't believe. I think I used a little bit of brake. Yep, a little bit of a little tap of the brake there. Tappity to rotate the car. A few hundredths it's worth if you can do it with just a sharp lift. That is part of how I got my perfect lap time down into the 3s. But I found it very difficult to do that lap after lap. And if you get it wrong, you're going to wash out through this corner and end up off the track out here. So I found that using a little bit of brake got the car rotated quicker, more consistently. And I know it probably sounds like I'm splitting hairs here as far as why we're getting on the brake. It's not to slow the car down, and it's not the slowing of the car down here that helps me stay on the track and out of the grass and sand out there. It's easier to get the car rotated quickly and getting back on the throttle quickly. If you don't synchronize those things just right, then the car just starts to slide and push out and oversteer or understeer. So I like using the brake for consistency, but if you're just really going for that hot lap and you just want to set a blistering time, I think doing an abrupt lift of the throttle is probably the quicker way to go about it. And again, we can use a lot of curb here. We can be really aggressive about it. We can use this concrete. That's no problem doing that. Again, don't feel like you need to track all the way out here. We talk about this probably every week. Yes, use all of the track, but only all of the track that your car needs. And we don't need this track out here. So like I said, as we're coming in the final corner, we can take this last little stretch in either third or fourth gear. The distance between the turn 5, turn 6 chicane and turn 7 is such that third gear, fourth gear, 6 of one, half dozen the other. If you're doing both perfectly, at least for me, I could not tell any difference in time whatsoever. So at that point, it just boils down to what you're comfortable with. If this stretch was any longer, then fourth gear would be the obvious choice. If it was any shorter, third gear would be the obvious choice. Shifting gears in this car, and we talk about this in the Skippy as well, shifting gears is expensive. So there's a cost to that shift. And in this car, there's a risk to the shift as well. But we'll just talk about the cost aspect of it. There's a time penalty for shifting gears. And so there needs to be enough of a payoff in terms of a long stretch where you don't need to come off the gas. There needs to be a payoff to justify the shift. And here it's just not there. But there's not a penalty for it either. So whatever you're comfortable with, when all else is equal, I like to simplify things. And I do find the high revs irritating, and they do make me want to shift. I've got all kinds of signals going off in my brain that I am in the wrong gear. The car is complaining. But if I can get past that, I can keep this corner a little bit simpler, a little bit less busy by staying in third gear. And again, there's some compression right here. It's right a moment before that compression that we want to start to get on the brakes. And if we've gone into fourth gear, we want to drop down into third. That way, when we hit the compression, we've got something to lean into. And you'll hear the car bottom out. You'll hear a clunk. No damage whatsoever from that. No worries. Be far to the right, of course, to open this corner up. And all kinds of good grip in here. If we find ourselves out here, we're going to have a bad time. At least in terms of pace, if not meeting up with a wall. So, all right, well, that is the in-depth portion. So I hope that was a help. Well, that's it for Oran Park South. Again, I think this is a very fun track, and I think we're going to see some incredible racing this week. If you have any questions or comments about the format or the content itself, such as a particular corner or an alternate line that's working really well for you, I'd really like to hear from you so that we can bounce ideas off of each other. Good luck this week.